Okay, so as I mentioned, welcome. This is either good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. My name is Baruch Lubinsky, and I am broadcasting from Israel. It's good to have everyone on the line, and I hope that we can cover a lot of really important concepts that will be really essential for people who are making Aliyah, and for those that maybe have already made Aliyah or are in the process, they're here over in Israel already. I hope that the information will also be very valuable. The seminar is really focused, this seminar at least, is really focused more to the people who haven't made Aliyah yet. But it's going to cover a lot of things that somebody who has already made Aliyah, it will be very, very relevant for them as well. Okay, so before I actually start on the material, I just wanted to give a big thank you as well to Kef International Shipping and Relocations for hosting this class. This is something that I have wanted to do for a long time and just has not happened, and their impetus got this thing together pretty quickly. So I'm really quite excited about it, and hopefully this will be the first of many other classes that I'll be able to give using this interface. I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to give a seminar like this and to reach people around North America than it is to be traveling. I've been traveling with Nefesh B'Nefesh to seminars in North America now for probably 7 or 8 years. And it takes a lot out of you when you're traveling on these long trips going from city to city. But this is really a pleasure. Anyways, welcome again. What I'm going to try to do in this seminar is to cover a lot of topics. I'm going to do it in a pretty quick overview way that I'm going to get you thinking about the things that you need to think about prior to Aliyah. And then as we go through the material, I'm happy if people want to write in specific questions or on the chat. Most of the questions, unless it's really like something is not understood, I'm going to leave to the end, and then I'm happy to stay on as long as necessary to answer some of the more specific questions that might come up. Okay. Okay, what's financial planning for Aliyah? Financial planning for Aliyah, it's not an event. It's not something that you can do at any one specific point in time. It's a process. You have to start thinking about the switch, how your life is going to be different over here in Israel versus how it's different, how it is where you're making Aliyah from. It's really critical to start thinking about your goals, right? Your lifestyle, how it's going to be reflected here in Israel, and how you define a successful Aliyah. If you have in mind that you need to have 2 cars, if you need to have a big house, that's fine. The average Israeli does not have that. But however you define your success in terms of your making Aliyah, in terms of implementing your goals, it's very critical that you have that definition at the very beginning of the process. If you want to come here for Zionistic reasons, for religious reasons, for family reasons, that's great. You just should have it in mind about what's important to you, because I hate to tell you this, I'm sure you've heard this now from many other people as well. It's not always going to be 100% roses. It's not always going to be a simple process, but I believe that everyone can be successful and can make it work financially. A lot of it is just getting the right information, understanding what's important to you and what's less important to you. You have to understand the difference between wants and needs. It's really critical in general whenever we're talking about financial planning, is to define the difference for yourself. What's a want and what's a need? Many times we blur that vision, those definitions, when we're dealing with day-to-day finances. And when we come to Israel, we have to really reevaluate what's important and what's less important. Is it really important that you're here in Israel? Great. So maybe you can make it work in a big city. Maybe you can't make it work financially in a big city because of the different costs associated with that. So that's why you have to really look at what is important and what's a true need for you, for your family, versus what is something you would like to have or you'd like to grow into, but it doesn't mean necessarily that you might have it immediately. It's going to be important while we look at this plan. I'm not going to cover actually every one of the points. The presentation, the PowerPoint that you're going to see is going to give us a guideline, but we're not going to be able to probably cover absolutely everything. Okay, it's very, very important that we look at putting a plan together that's going to be not only a short-term plan of how I'm going to get through the first number of months and let's say the first year or two, but also long-term, how it's going to impact. Okay, let me just ask, before I continue, I want to just send a quick question out to everyone. If everyone can answer, I just sent you out a little poll about which country you're currently living in. Okay, almost everybody's voted. Great. Okay, about, looks like 70% of you are calling from the US and 30% are already in Israel. Okay, good. That gives me what the basic guideline is, which I am going to focus a lot on coming from outside of Israel to Israel, but most of the things will be relevant as well for those people that are actually in Israel. Okay, what about tying up loose ends at home? Okay, what are some of the things you need to be really thinking about? Okay, for non-Americans, residency issue is a major issue. People who are in Canada or Australia, the UK, it really depends on where you are resident for tax. That will determine your tax liability. In the United States, people who are making Aliyah from the United States, it's much less critical residency issue because whether you are residents in the US or not, you will continue to have to file taxes in the US under almost all circumstances. Okay, but there is still a double taxation issue. We're going to talk a little bit about taxation. Depending on how complicated your situation is, you might need to seek guidance from a tax professional because there can be situations where there is double taxation. In general, there is a tax treaty between Israel and the US which avoids double taxation. So under a simplistic situation where you have a capital gain in the United States and you might have to pay taxes here in Israel on that. So there will be a treaty that resolves who you pay taxes to, as well as avoiding double taxation. But there are some situations where you might actually have double taxation, and that predominantly, oh, one second, I've got the slides didn't, one second. Okay, went off of that. Let's see. How did I get you off of audience view? I took that poll and now I can't see. One second. I figure out how to get you back to the slides. Close. Okay. There we go. Okay. So let's see. Sorry about that. I lost your slides for a few minutes. Okay, so there's one main situation where you actually might have double taxation, and that results when your income is defined in one country as being a certain type, like it might be a capital gain, in another country it might be defined as something else like a royalty. Okay, so we're going to talk about it a little bit more when we go through the taxation side. Estate planning is also something that is very important, right? To be looking at what your current estate plan is, as well as how it's going to change by you moving to Israel. Okay, asset management. Are your assets completely located in the United States? Does that need to change as a result of moving to Israel? Right, we're going to talk a lot more about that. You might have a business that you own. And as a result of moving to Israel, there might be control issues, how you're going to continue to control that business. You might have taxation issues because your taxation might differ when you're resident in a foreign country, when you're resident in the US, as opposed to when you come and move to Israel. Okay, very important to look and to go through different scenarios. Okay, don't assume that you're going to put one scenario in place and that's exactly what's going to happen. You have to be realistic and you have to go through potential scenarios for the better or for the worse. Okay, a 5-year plan. I often recommend to Olim that they should look at a 5-year plan, putting together a 5-year plan that looks at things like your commitments over the next number of years. Do you have family that you need to support back home in the United States? Do you have simchas coming up? Do you have a bar mitzvah? Do you have weddings? Any special needs? Do you have special needs children? What about putting together an emergency fund? So it's very important to have a certain amount of money that's put aside at the beginning of the process, because many times it will take people a period of time to ramp up and to start working here in Israel. Or even if they can find work, oftentimes you might not be able to find work at the same pay level that you were before you made Aliyah. And as a result, you might need to go into some of your emergency funds over that period of time. Right? Are there education needs? Again, we talked about special events, housing. What's your housing situation going to look like when you're making Aliyah? Are you selling a home over there and now you're looking to buy into a cottage, like a house here, or are you going to suffice with a smaller apartment? What can you afford? Right? We're going to talk a lot about, substantially about real estate here in Israel. Israeli real estate has gone up very, very strongly in the last 8 years, and it really does impact tremendously on the average Oleh. Okay. Okay, let's go right into real estate. Okay, the Israeli real estate market. Right? Are we in a bubble or not? I'm assuming that most people who are considering Aliyah, one of the things that people seriously look into, and they need to seriously look into, is what the real estate market is like here in Israel, what they can afford when they come to Israel. Because real estate in the last 8 years has gone up on average by 100%. And in some cities, it's actually gone up even substantially more than that. So it's very, very critical to identify where you think you can afford to live. Israel has got a lot of unique characteristics to the real estate market. Some of them I mentioned there, the political uncertainties, with regards to giving back land. There's limited land resources. There's a lot of foreign ownership, although it's not as high as people might believe. We're only really talking about somewhere between 3 and 5% of real estate in this country is owned by foreigners. But it makes an impact. If you have a constant inflow of either new Olim or tourists, people who want to buy a place here in Israel, so it can help to increase prices. There's a very large differential between the center, what they call the merkaz, and the periphery. The periphery, right, the north, the south, prices are substantially cheaper, and it's something that people need to consider. Are they going to go to a cheaper place where they might not have as many English speakers, where they might not have as large as a support of a community, or not? Right? Language is an issue, right? If you start going into the periphery, you'll find many, much less English speakers in those locations, but it could be that that's what you can afford. The country, to a certain degree, is actually getting smaller, not just because they've, in the past given back land, but because the infrastructure has been improving substantially. The train links, the high-speed train links have made it much easier to commute to the center of the country from the north and the south. So it definitely makes it easier, and people should consider being out, moving a little further out, especially if they're open to a more rural type of setting, whether it's in the yeshuv or or a small city where prices can often be much cheaper. Okay, so what about going forward from here? Everyone knows that the prices have been going up strongly, have gone up strongly. What do we anticipate from here? So I'm not a Navi, I'm not a prophet. I can't tell you where real estate prices are going to go. My personal opinion is that everything that goes up comes down at a certain point in time. There's no such thing as a one-way direction, even though Israelis and many people forget the fact that we have gone through substantial periods of time where real estate has come down. And everybody kind of forgets about that and thinks, oh, it's going to consistently just go up, go up, go up. I'm personally not of the opinion that it is going to continue. It's for sure, I don't think it's going to continue growing at the same level that it has grown in the last number of years. We've already seen a little bit of a slowing down of that growth. And then I would add to that this government, the current government, is probably the most active government that I've seen going back now a couple decades in terms of doing things to ease the price of real estate. It's become a major issue. Salary levels have not grown anywhere near the level of what prices of homes have grown in this country, and it means that a lot of younger couples, a lot of the working class, the working middle class are being priced out of the market, and so it's become a major issue for them to deal with. And even in the relatively short period of time, we're only talking about a new government of 3 or 4 months, I think it's even like 3.5 months, they've already started making some major changes. Okay, yes, you have to figure out, there's a cost-benefit analysis in terms of rent versus buying. In many circumstances, renting can make sense, and I recommend to new Olim especially that they should be renting at the beginning under most circumstances until they're finding their community, until they're really finding where they want to be, where they're working, etc., or where they need to have access to. So renting makes sense, especially at the very beginning. But everybody has to look at their own individual circumstances and see what makes sense, right? If your money is going towards rent, so then it's ideally then your other money that you have in savings should be working for you, and not just sitting there making very little. So it's a trade-off. Here's a slide. Here's a picture from my book that I looked at a couple years ago that shows the line that you see that's going straight up. That's the price of owner-occupied apartments. And the other ones are rents and the nominal wage. Those three generally have gone hand in hand, going back now decades, which makes sense as the wages have grown. So the prices that people are paying both to own as well as to rent generally will go up, and they'll go up in a similar manner. This chart is a couple years out, but it's just as dramatic in terms of the differential between them. And my long-term assumption is that that it is not sustainable and that things will come down at a certain point in time, although nobody knows how and when that's going to happen. Okay, here again, here's another just quick chart that talks about the number of years that you need in order to buy a house, and it's actually gone up even since then. You see, Israel is substantially more expensive than the US and most other Western countries. Okay, let's go through in terms of selling your house, selling your home before you go. What would be some of the reasons not to sell your property? So one reason would be as a source of income, because you might want to hold on to your property at home in your former country and earn income that can help to subsidize your rent over here. It also provides a fallback option. If somebody's thinking, oh, I'm going to come on Aliyah, but I want to check things out. I don't want to commit, so I don't want to necessarily sell my home and give up my community, and I'll keep it. So that might work for some people. I'll tell you, For most people, that's really a disadvantage. It's actually one of the reasons to sell on the other side of things, the psychology of still owning, because if you have a place to go back to, it makes it much easier to give up. It makes it much easier to go and just say, well, I'm going to move back and I always have another place. When you're here, when you sell, it makes it much more permanent, and people really give it a much better go, even when they might go through difficulties at the beginning. Right? Owning and renting out a property when you're very far away from that property also can be very time consuming and stressful. Having to manage, if you have somebody back in your home town that is managing it for you, okay, that might work if it's a close relative, especially, or a friend, or a very reliable, agent, but it can be stressful. There's a time differential. It can just be stressful not being in your place and not knowing what's going on. Anybody knows that when you have renters, things happen to your home. They don't treat it the same way that you do. Sometimes I've heard of situations where the value of your property has gone down substantially. So many times people will find, no, they want to sell, they understand the market. When they're there and they know what's a good offer, they know what they're willing to accept. And when they're not there, when you're really separated from the home housing market back home, it can make it much more difficult to make that decision. Obviously, there's fees involved, management fees, etc. For Americans, there's no residency issue. Actually, there might be a slight residency issue on a tax level for a state, for state taxes. But if you continue to own a property, so it might be more difficult for you to say that you're a non-resident in your state, and therefore you might be liable for state taxes as well. And then again, of course, right, the non-liquid asset, many times people will need that money. You'll need the money if you start to look at the buy. Sometimes people will need the money even just as cash flow. Okay, what about housing here in Israel? So we talked a lot about it already. The financing sources that are available here in Israel are basically through the banking sector. Interest rates have come down in Israel very strongly, just like they have in the US. They're at all-time lows, quite affordable on the one hand. On the other hand, wages are not at the same level as you have in the US, so you really have to make that calculation. If it's something that you don't know how to calculate, how to determine how much you can afford, so then you shouldn't be meeting with somebody. You should be talking to an advisor. There are mortgage consultants out there that can help you, financial planners like myself that can really walk you through the process of determining how much you can really afford. Okay, let's look a little bit talk a little bit about tax planning. Okay, Olim have one major advantage in terms of tax planning, which is the 10-year tax holiday. And that doesn't mean if you're making Aliyah from the United States that you have a 10-year tax holiday completely, because you still continue to have the obligation to file taxes in the United States. But it does mean in terms of Israel that any income that is derived outside of the state of Israel, that income is tax-free in Israel. Okay, so let me be clear. If you're working here in Israel, but your employer is in the United States, for instance, but your work is being done here through the computer, or telecommuting, or any other work that you can do here physically in Israel, it doesn't matter who your employer is, so you will be obligated to pay taxes in Israel. It's only if that income is being derived outside of the state of Israel do you have that 10-year exemption. So for instance, let's say you had a business and you were traveling abroad to run the business. So that income that was being derived from running the business would be exempt. If you have investments and you have capital gains or dividends that are being generated outside of Israel, so that again would be tax-free in Israel. Okay, it is an advantage. It can be more of an advantage if you're a non-American, but I'm assuming that that pretty much everyone that's on the call here is an American, unless somebody wants to write me a specific question. That's my going assumption. Okay, the 1 year to decide rule, basically it enables people to put their tax situation on hold for the first year and not decide to make Aliyah yet. It can be relevant with regards to some more sophisticated planning issues, let's say where you need to structure a business in such a way before you make Aliyah, but you actually want to be here in Israel the first year to see if it's going to work before you go through that structuring. So that enables you to kind of put the decision on hold. It's not really relevant for most Olim. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Israeli tax system. There's no universal tax reporting here in Israel. That means that employers remit taxes for their employees. Okay? You don't have to file a tax return at the end of the year. There are individuals under certain circumstances who do. Self-employed people have to file. If you have above a certain amount of assets, if you have assets abroad, you might have a reporting requirement not within the first 10 years, but after that, right? If you own a business, not even just if you're running that business, but let's say if you own a business, you also might be required. But for the average Israeli, there's actually no universal reporting requirement. You don't have to file a tax return here in Israel, and that can be good, and it can also be bad, right? You can be good because you don't have to go through the whole process of filing a tax return. On the other hand, you actually have to understand a little bit about the tax system to make sure that your employer is taking off the right amount of taxes. And if you're working in multiple businesses or for multiple employers, so it's more important that you actually understand a little bit about how the system works to make sure that they're taking it off correctly. I've seen many, many mistakes that have been made over the years, and if you don't understand at least the basic level of how things are structured, how your salary is coming in, what they're supposed to be taking off money for, what they're not, you can lose a lot of unnecessary money by not understanding that. Okay, in Israel, all Israelis are given a certain amount of tax credits that reduce their tax exposure. There's a certain basic amount, which is 2.25 for all men, and women get an extra half. And then, depending on your individual circumstances, so you can earn additional credits. If you live in a development town or you're on a border, so you might get extra credits. If you're a woman and for all children under 18, you get an extra credit. For men under the age of, if they have children under the age of 3, they get an extra 2 credits, right? If somebody is divorced or a single parent, they might be entitled to extra credits. All these individual circumstances, if you just got out of the army, and your credits will then determine how much taxes you pay because they reduce the taxable level. Okay, Israel's tax system is a graduated tax system, so you pay more taxes as you earn more money, and the credits are fixed, meaning for your individual circumstances. So without any additional credits, the average Israeli will start paying taxes above around 5,500 shekels a month. So you're talking about $1,500 is exempt on a monthly basis from taxes here in Israel, just to give you an idea. Okay, it's really important when you're planning the Aliyah process to be thinking about not just current assets and revenue, but also future. We'll talk a little bit about more when we get to retirement planning as well. Investment taxes. So in Israel, unlike in many other countries, there is a fixed tax rate for investments. That means from the first shekel that you earn on capital gains or dividends to a million or billion, doesn't make a difference. You are taxed at a fixed rate. Okay. Somebody here asked about tax credit for tzedakah. So yeah, here in Israel, recognize charities, which are they're called in Israel by Sif Arba'in B'Sheish. That means like the statute 46, which means that they're an approved charity, all donations to them, you are entitled to a 35% tax rebate or tax reduction. But you still will have had to have paid that amount of taxes. That means, let's say, if you gave a lot of tzedakah, but you didn't actually pay any taxes at all, you won't get that money back. It's only to reduce your taxes. So if you're earning enough money and then you give charity at that point in time, so then you will get 35% back of everything that you give to these approved charities. Okay, there was a new trust legislation as of the beginning of 2014. It required all beneficiaries as well as trustees where there are Israeli beneficiaries to start reporting those trusts to the Israel Tax Authority. It's been a major adjustment for the country, for the system, because it used to be, going back probably now 6-7 years ago, that there actually was no trust legislation that impacted on Israelis, and so it was a very, very well used tax planning strategy, and that has changed, and now there's a universal reporting requirement. There's no inheritance tax at all in Israel currently. They keep talking about the possibility of instituting an inheritance tax. Currently there isn't. So in terms of estate planning, if you're coming from the US, that's really where the major elements of planning will need to be invested in terms of the US estate planning issues. Here in Israel, it's not relevant, except for maybe there's some very, very unique situations. But for the whole assets transfer from generation to generation here in Israel without paying any taxes. If you have a complicated tax planning situation, if you have specific questions regarding taxes on a state level, or if you have a business, if you are getting pensions from different agencies, from the state, from government. So these are all very, very specific questions that you need to seek out a tax professional, because the law can change dramatically based on your situation with a very, very small little fact change. So I encourage people to reach out to an accountant or a lawyer as necessary, and I'm happy to refer people to professionals that I work with as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about asset management. So asset management from abroad is not a simple thing. Yes, on the one hand, you might think, and it's true, we have internet, we're online, we're connected with our accounts. It should be very simple for us to manage our money from here in Israel, even though it's located abroad. So I can tell you from again, working with many Olim, that unfortunately that's not the case. It is not so simple. Part of it has to do with the regulatory environment, right? Especially in the United States. The banking system has been becoming tighter and tighter ever since September 11th, 2001. It's become more and more tight over the years. The banks, the brokerage houses have been less open to working with non-resident Americans. That means Americans that are outside of the United States. I've had many situations where banks or brokerage houses, after many years, have just decided to close up accounts and send people their money back. I had a client, a 90-plus-year-old woman who had an account with one of the major brokerage houses for 40 or 50 years, didn't even get a phone call, didn't even get a letter. She got a letter and a check basically saying, here, the money is being returned to you. We don't want you anymore as a client. And so it is becoming more challenging for non-resident Americans to manage their monies from abroad, beyond the technical issues of, as you see here, right, transfers, internet, phone, meaning you want to have all those technical arrangements set up that you can make transfers over the phone or by sending in a fax. Yes, you need to go into your branch and make sure that they understand that you're not going to be there and that you might actually have to approve things from abroad. And if they can't accommodate you, so then you might look at setting up a new account before you make Aliyah. But even just the technical uh, details aside, you really have to make sure that your bank is willing to work with you, and that's really become a bigger question mark recently. Okay, having your money make Aliyah. What does that mean? So there's something that's called investment bias. Okay, most people, when they're investing their assets, will put a substantial amount of their assets in the local economy, and it's something that is found around the world. So the same investment bias exists here in Israel, and there's a lot of reasons why people should be thinking of bringing some of their money here to Israel. Okay, when you're spending shekels, when you're living here in Israel, you're going to be spending shekels. So it makes sense to match your spending with your income. And so you reduce your risk by having your money invested in the local currency. There are also many reasons related just to the economy as well. If you're connected with what's happening locally, you're connected with the inflation rate, you're connected with the interest rate, you're connected with what's happening here, which is going to impact on you as living here. And so bringing your money to Israel is something that I definitely encourage people to think about. Okay, that doesn't mean that everybody should bring all their money here. It means that people should be thinking about how Israel plays a part. Israel has been a great place to manage your money. The Tel Aviv Stock Exchange is the main stock exchange, the only really stock exchange that's got a very well-developed stock and bond market, both government bonds and corporate bonds. The Israeli government bonds that are traded on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange are not the Israel bonds that are marketed as kind of like a staka outside of Israel. These are government bonds that are traded by the billions on a day-to-day basis on the Tel Aviv stock market. Okay, beyond North America, United States and Canada, the largest presence on NASDAQ of any country worldwide until recently at least was Israel. I heard recently that might have changed to China, but Israel has had a major impact there, and a lot of the companies that are traded in the United States are also traded here. Okay, I see that different people are writing in questions. That's great. I'm going to just put the questions on the side, and I'll try and get back as much as I can at the end. Okay, the investment climate here has been great. If you look historically at the returns of the Tel Aviv stock market, it has outproduced most developing markets around the world, going back not just a couple years, but going back decades. And let me show you quickly here a couple quick charts. This one's looking from the year 2000 to the year 2012, and you see how the Tel Aviv 25 stock index did compared to the S&P and the NASDAQ. Right now, in the last 7+ years, so the American markets have done very well. The S&P, the NASDAQ, they've come up very strongly, and the Israeli market has not done as well. It's been a little bit more inconsistent, but you can see in the next graph, you can see that even in looking in the last 10 years, where the Israeli market has had a couple of down years over that period of time since 2008, and yet it still has fared pretty well. You see there the blue line in the middle, that is Israel. The one at the top is the NASDAQ, and the one at the bottom is the S&P. Okay, Israel has done very well historically, and the bond market has also been a great place to invest your money. Now, it has become much more challenging in recent years because interest rates have gone very, very low here in Israel, just like they have in the US. Yeah, it's a major challenge. Many times people will invest a little bit more aggressively and go into the corporate bond market in order to get a little better yield. Maybe they'll invest more in stocks and try and create a dividend-producing portfolio. There's different strategies involved, but it's something you definitely need to think about how Israel plays into that risk, into your portfolio. Okay, I'm going to mention just, well, I have everybody on the line here also. If you notice at the very bottom of that menu that you have, there's handouts. There's a couple handouts that I left there. One of them is an article that I wrote a couple years ago that summarizes some of the issues that we're talking about now. That's the ABCs of Aliyah financial planning. It's a PDF there. And I also attached the first chapter of my book that I put out a couple years ago. Right? It's called The Financial Guide to Aliyah and Life in Israel. And that also gives you a good overview of a lot of the issues. So please feel free to download those at any point in time. Okay, some of the questions here about American retirement plans, I'm going to get back to in a few minutes. Okay, here we go. In terms of retirement planning, so I'll come back to it here. Okay, a lot of times you will have people who are making Aliyah in retirement or pre-retirement, close to retirement. So it's really critical to look at how retirement is going to impact. It's going to be impacted by being in Israel. You're going to put together a plan that's going to look at all your different income streams and how taxes are going to be impacting on those. Right? One of the things I'll point out, which is a major benefit for Americans that are making Aliyah, is that here in Israel, they are not going to be obligated to pay taxes on their Social Security. Okay, that means that you might have been receiving Social Security in the US in retirement and actually paying taxes on it there. But as soon as you come to Israel, that Social Security is completely tax-free, not only here in Israel, but also in the United States. It's related to the Israel tax treaty, and it can impact very, very positively on people's retirement. Right? You have to think through what other potential income streams you have. Do you have property that you're going to derive income from? Are you going to live off your investments? Do you qualify for Bituach Leumi? Generally, the cutoff is that you need to be in Israel prior to 60 and working here in order to qualify for Israel's social insurance, which is Bituach Leumi. Okay? And then you need to, on the other side of the coin, you need to be looking at your projected expenses. You need to look at what it's going to look like for you here in retirement, how much it's going to cost you, put together a budget. In my book, I have a number of different budgets, projected budgets for people, families, as well as individuals. You need to really understand where your money is going to be going to and what your lifestyle is going to look like over here, and then you can balance it with your income streams. Okay? What are some of the other issues you need to be thinking about in retirement? So quickly, there's disability insurance. So disability insurance here in Israel generally will stop at retirement age. That means you're only going to be covered until either 62 for women or 67 for men. If you have a disability policy from the old country, so you should look very seriously at whether or not that policy will be honored here and whether it's worthwhile for you to continue to pay into that policy. Same thing with health insurance, right? If you have health insurance there, many times you will give up that health insurance, but you will come to Israel and you'll be covered by the standard health insurance as well as the private health insurance market. Israel's health insurance industry is divided between the public sector and the private sector. Private sector is the insurance companies who offer supplemental policies, as well as there's also the government sector, what they're called like the HMOs, the health funds, or the kupot here in Israel, and they also offer extra supplemental insurance, as well as long-term care insurance here in Israel. But as you get older, obviously those policies become more and more expensive, so you have to really assess whether you can afford them and whether you keep an old policy or whether you need to look at creating a new one. Okay, just in passing here, the healthcare proxy, there is a national healthcare registry that you can file your wishes in the event that you're not able to make decisions by yourself. If this is something that's important for you, then you should definitely be seeking legal assistance to put together a healthcare proxy and a will, because the system is different here, and you do need to personalize your wills, your healthcare proxy to the Israel environment. Okay, now some people asked about what about my assets abroad? What if I have a 401k? What if I have an IRA? Can I move those to Israel? So the short answer is no. There's no arrangement whereby you can easily move your money from the United States, from a retirement plan in the US to a retirement plan in Israel. The only retirement plans in Israel that are available are plans where you've worked here in Israel and you're contributing together with your employer. So no, you cannot easily do that. Now, that being said, there are certain ways that you can actually kind of move your assets over here. They're a little bit beyond the scope of what we can really discuss today. If somebody's interested in finding out information about that, I'm happy offline to answer questions. But basically, the short is that if you need to access that money, you're going to access it by taking money out and by paying taxes over there. And if you take taxes, if you take it out early, you'll pay more taxes on it. If you wait until actually you're in retirement, you'll pay less taxes. You'll pay at your marginal tax rate. Okay. So again, I had the same few questions about, are there Israeli assets you can invest in with your 401k? Yes, there are. There are mostly American-based or American-traded Israeli stocks, but there are some more sophisticated planning mechanisms whereby it's a possibility of using your American retirement savings account to access the Israeli market, but it's not so simple to do, and it has to be like you have to have a major reason why you want to do it. Otherwise, the cost can be quite prohibitive. Okay. Okay, let's talk a little, just very quickly, about the employment benefits here in Israel. Right. In general, as I mentioned, the Israeli employment market salary ranges are considerably lower. We're not talking about just 5 or 10 or 15 or 20%. In many cases, you could be earning half of what you're earning there. You have to look at your individual circumstances and see how your salary is going to be impacted by moving to Israel. Okay, but even though salary ranges are can be significantly lower, there are some significant savings. Okay, and really the three main benefits that an employee is entitled to is that there's a mandatory pension of, let's just call it 6%, for simplicity's sake. 6% is contributed by the employee, 6% is contributed by the employer. That's one, that's the mandatory pension. There's also a mandatory severance law, which obligates the employer to put aside another 8 1/3% of one's wages towards severance. And then there is a savings plan, let's call it, that's called the Keren Hishtalmut. Keren Hishtalmut has funded 2.5% by the employee and up to 7.5% by the employer. And that's a significant amount of money between those three amounts. You're talking about, right, 12% and another 8, you're up to 20 and another 10. So that can be a very, very substantial amount. Almost 30% of your wages is going towards savings. The Keren Hishtalmut is accessible after 6 years, completely tax-free here in Israel. You might have a tax exposure in the US, but here in Israel it's tax-free. Okay. The pension savings and the severance are only available, severance is available obviously upon either being fired or leaving a job. Doesn't have to be taken, but it can be taken at that point in time, and the pension is accessible at retirement. But those are a very major percentage of your salary that can go towards long-term savings, and that's one of the secrets of how Israelis get by. They get by putting a large amount aside on a monthly basis by having that money being contributed before they even access one penny. And so you have savings rates of like 20 or 30, up to 30%. And that's much, much higher than it is in the US. Okay, if you're looking at running a business, opening a business, so structuring issue is a major issue. We're not going to be able to cover that here, but there's a chapter in my book. There's a couple, one of the chapters about the structuring issue. It is a major consideration for people who are going to be running their own business. Okay. Oops. Okay, we talked a little bit about insurance. One of the major decisions that people need to think about before they make Aliyah is, do I keep my policies or not? I might have a life insurance policy. I might have a whole life policy that I've been paying for many years. Do I keep it? Generally, American life insurance policies, especially if they're term, are cheaper than equivalent Israeli ones. But you have to make sure that those policies are valid. You have to make sure that you can afford them. You might have been able to afford them on an American salary, but that doesn't mean that you can afford them once you've made Aliyah. Right? It used to be that if you wanted to get a new policy in the US, you had to get it before Aliyah. In recent years, there's been a couple of agents that have been working here in Israel, even America, that are offering it to Americans and even non-Americans who are not residents in the US. So the possibility of getting an American policy is definitely a possibility after Aliyah. But if you have an existing policy, it's something you should look into very seriously. Okay. In general, the insurance that's available here in Israel is very different than it is in the US. There is no whole life insurance here in Israel. One of the reasons why is because there is no estate tax. And so the whole life industry is definitely structured around estate planning in the US. And here in Israel, there is no inheritance tax and there is no whole life insurance. It's all term. It all ends at a certain point in time. Right? Many of the life insurance, disability insurance are built into your retirement savings plans. And so it's really important that when you set those up, you set them up with the right amount of insurance. Again, these are things that once you come to Israel and you start negotiating your contract, you're going to want to get into a little bit more. We're not going to really cover it a lot today. In general, the insurance system has become more and more unified. They're trying to encourage competition. And so they are trying to unify things, even within the medical industry. It used to be that the health funds, each one of them had their own supplemental policies and they were all marketing them separately, trying to attract clients. And they have instituted recently that the supplemental insurance has to be unified. So it makes it much easier for us to shop around. Okay, let me give a final couple quick tips related to making it here in Israel, and then I'll go back and see if I can answer any of the outstanding questions that I didn't get to. I'm going to put up to everyone, I'm going to just give you, in case people have to start leaving as well. So my email address is baruch@lebinsky.com. Okay, and I'll write you as well the best number to reach me at if anybody has specific questions. Okay. Okay, in terms of quick tips. So living in Israel, sometimes people forget that you're living in the Middle East and there's a different business culture here. It's not an understatement to say that it is critical to negotiate. And I'm talking about negotiating everything, right? Sometimes in my classes, I'll tell people in a big audience, that in Israel, you can negotiate everything. Now, you might not be successful in how you negotiate things, but you can really negotiate almost everything in this country, from walking into a supermarket or a bank or your mortgage or buying a car or you name it. You have a lot of flexibility, and you have to remember that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a hard negotiator, a tough negotiator. You just sometimes have to ask for a discount. Very important thing to remember when you're coming here. Okay, finding a guardian angel. What do I mean there? There are people who have come here before you. You're not recreating the wheel. find people who have done it, who have come to, settled in the community. English speakers used to be that, you know, that you couldn't find English speakers in every community. No such thing anymore. There are English speakers everywhere. You need to really find that person who can help you, whether it's in a government office or whether it's just a private person or whether it's a professional. They can really guide you along the process. Right? It's really critical to educate yourself with regards to the OLED discounts, with regards to any large commitment. Right? If you're signing on something and you're committing yourself to paying for many, many, many years, really it's critical that you understand what you're signing. Invest in a translation, invest with working with a professional who can look at the documents and make sure that your interests are being protected. Okay, the Israeli system is not like moving to another state. It really is a completely different financial system, and you have to really appreciate that. It's everything is different. The norms, the cultural norms, how people do business, just how we pay our bills, how things are structured. Everything is different here. You got to educate yourself. Okay, one of the things I also very, very highly recommend when you're making Aliyah is you should be tracking your income and your expenses, especially for the first 6 months to a year, because there's a lot of money that goes out. You need to really know how much you're spending versus what you can really anticipate to be earning, because the last thing you want is to wake up 6 months or a year into Aliyah and find that you spent too much of your initial nest egg on the settling process and don't have enough money to actually live on, and that maybe you needed your assets in order to generate more income from in retirement. Maybe you just need them to adjust to the new employment environment and make sure you have enough time to have your wages grow over. Okay, very important to track. Okay, and then the last little tip is related to any bank accounts, insurance, etc. All the different accounts, policy information. Your financial lives are going to become more complicated by moving to Israel. You really want to keep proper order. Do yourself a big favor, yourself and your family. Make a list. Keep track of everything. Too many assets in the world are lost. There are many, many, many situations where people have lost track of their assets. You want to keep a proper listing, and it'll be much more important when you make Aliyah as well. Okay, so that's what I basically had on this initial. This is as I mentioned, this was a cover from the book that I put out a couple years ago. It's available in bookstores in the United States, in Israel, as well as on my website. Let me go back now. Actually, let me just go one forward. There you see my contact information again. And again, thank you very much to Kef International for sponsoring this. And hopefully this will be the first of many seminars and we can start to actually go through the different topics and looking at a lot more in depth than what I was able to do in this very, very quick overview. But let me look back at some of the questions and see if I didn't cover anything. If you see that I haven't covered something, so please feel free to send it in again. Okay, somebody asked about renting being a very important thing to figure out where you want to be. Yeah, agree. I mentioned that as well. We talked about the 401k accounts and how that basically works. And yeah, in general, American retirement plans cannot be transferred here to Israel. Thank you. I have one compliment with regards to the book. Thank God it's been a very, very positive feedback. So here is a question with regards to if you have a U.S. job, can you pay into Bituach Leumi to qualify? So if you're working here in Israel and you are getting paid from an American employer, so then technically here in Israel you have to pay into Bituach Leumi. The only question would be if you are working abroad and you're traveling abroad and you don't technically have to report here in Israel, can you do that in order to start getting credit? So yeah, you can. I believe you can. That you would just have to set up what's called a TEEC, and file with the Israel Tax Authority, and then you would have to report that income. It might be detrimental in terms of your taxes in the short run, but if you want to make sure that you're paying into Bituach Leumi to qualify for it, so yeah, that might be possible. Okay, somebody asked about withdrawing money early from a 401k. So again, it will depend on the taxation in the United States. So whatever the taxes are over there, that's what you'll have to pay. I'm not an accountant, I'm not a tax lawyer, very familiar with the tax issues, but you need to talk to your American accountant to determine how much you're going to pay if you take out money from your 401k. Okay, here's a question about, is it important to move to a non-tax state in the U.S. before making Aliyah or residing in Israel without making Aliyah? Okay, so this really relates to the residency issue that I mentioned. So if you are becoming a non-resident in the United States, that means you're no longer going to be resident. You're no longer there for tax purposes. You don't have a residence anymore. You don't have a home. You can visit, but you're not there for how they define your legal residency. Once you become a non-resident, you will not be obligated to pay state taxes in the United States. So it won't matter which state you're resident in, because you're not resident in any state at all anymore. If you are going to be living part-time in the US and part-time in Israel, such that you might actually qualify as being a resident in both countries, so then your tax situation can get very complicated, and you need to speak with a professional to figure out how you can structure things, because obviously you have to find the state that you want to live in, but you have to balance that with the tax consideration. Okay, I have a question here about tips for employment recruiters. Do you know professional networks to join? So yeah, there are a lot available online through LinkedIn and different groups. That's really kind of a question that I would throw out to Nefesh B'Nefesh. They have an employment department that deals exclusively with that. Okay, somebody asked about disability income. Okay, so here it's about whether that you're allowed to earn a certain amount of money and still qualify for the disability. Okay, so you're going to have a dual issue. You're going to have what the law says in the United States and still qualifying over there, and then you're going to have the law, what it means over here, and they could be completely different. So you have to speak with an accountant here in Israel to find out, depending on the level of your disability, you might not qualify, right? You might not be able to earn any income here in Israel, and you might be able to earn income in the US. It really depends on the level of how much you're earning. Now, you cannot assume that any of the laws are the same. You can't assume that it's the same situation for anything that you do. You really do have to check it out and see what the impact is going to be over here. Okay, I have here, in terms of recommendations for professionals, I'm happy to do that offline. Somebody's asking about a 45-hour-a-month work limit for Social Security, I'm assuming you're talking about? Okay, so I'm not actually following your question 100%. Do you want to spell it out a little bit more? In the meantime, I'm just going to go on. If I'm not employed in Israel, am I entitled to unemployment benefits? So yes. So there's a certain amount. You get a certain sal klita, which is an absorption basket for the first 6 months, a year, I believe, that you're here in Israel. That is kind of like your unemployment benefits. If you still are not able to find employment after the first year, so then you might qualify for, and it's not really unemployment, it's actually an income support benefit. So if you don't have any, income coming in, you might be entitled to some general income support from the state, but not unemployment benefits per se. Okay, again, with regards to employment issues, I would really ask people to contact Nefesh B'Nefesh. That's one of the areas that they should be able to help you with. Okay, and okay, so somebody's asking about working a certain amount before for full retirement age and still being able to collect Social Security. So again, that's the U.S. That's a U.S. issue. Social Security and qualifying for Social Security is a 100% U.S. issue. So you have to like look at and speak to somebody in the U.S. who specializes in Social Security there to determine what you can or you can't do. That has no relation to Israel. Israel will look at your Social Security and it's viewed as a pension that is not taxable here in Israel and has nothing to do with your employment. Doesn't impact on your taxes at all here. Doesn't impact at all if you want to work, right? They're completely two separate states, two separate issues. Okay. What kind of benefits can a young adult who is disabled receive? Again, I'm gonna forward that on. Ask you please to contact Nefesh B'Nefesh with regards to there are substantial benefits available for people who have disabilities. I know some clients that I have who have found it much easier to deal with adult children who have disabilities because of all the different benefits that are available here. But you have to really like look into your own individual circumstances. Okay. Okay, I think I am going to wrap it up. I hope that this was an enjoyable and informative seminar. If people would like to send me any feedback or specific topics for future seminars, I'm more than happy. Would be really, really happy to hear from people. My assumption is that the next seminar that I'm going to do will not take place until after the Chagim. But you never know. So if you're not on my mailing list, please go to my website and or you might be contacted now that we part of the as part of the seminar. If you were interested in joining the website, I usually send out monthly emails with articles that I've written and pointing people to what's been going on locally, different issues. And I'm happy to help. I should have actually said it at the beginning as well. My background is as a financial planner and as a portfolio manager. I help people with general financial planning issues, as well as help with specific asset management issues. So if I can help anyone, it would be a pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you all here in Israel. Okay. Any last questions? No? Great. Okay. I hope everyone is well. Take care. Bye-bye.